Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Priya Marwa, and I'm the Adolescent Development Manager in UNICEF New York. My focus is on adolescents in emergencies and peace building. And from UNICEF, and on behalf of all the co organizers that you see on your screen here today, UNFPA, Norwegian Refugee Council, the UN Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Restless Development, Women's Refugee Commission, the Global Youth Refugee Youth Network, and last but not the least, the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, including our very own Youth Compact champions. It's a handful of co organizers, but we all welcome you, and we're very excited to get this opportunity to hold this session on working with and for young people in humanitarian and protracted crises. This is under the inclusion priority theme, and we're trying to here ask ourselves, is our humanitarian response inclusive enough? And in our case, is our humanitarian response inclusive of young people in all their diversities? Well, we look forward to an amazing session and some deep dives with all of you. And with me, I have an inspiring young colleague, Valentina, who is also co moderating this session with me. And I'm going to now ask her to introduce herself and pass it over to our keynote speaker. Thank you, Valentina. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be co-moderating this event today. I am Valentina Bianco, a human rights activist from Argentina. At the moment, I am volunteering in Lesbos Island, Greece, where I assist young refugees that live in Moria 2 refugee camp. I have worked alongside young people for more than 8 years now in different settings, including in the humanitarian crisis that the Wichi indigenous people face in northern Argentina. I am also one of the 20 Youth Compact champions. This is a program sponsored by the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action that supports young people affected by protracted crises and promotes their inclusion into humanitarian settings. As you know, young people are a vital force in emergency preparedness and response. They have a wide range of capacities and unique needs, but they often get lost between programming for children and programming for adults. The IASC guidelines are such an excellent first step that try to address this gap. I am very happy today that these standards exist and that now we have a clear guide to inform the work of humanitarian actors on how to include young people on a daily basis. One thing that I really appreciate about the guidelines is the fact that they are trying to move away from an illusion of inclusion to actually create spaces for meaningful participation led by the youth. Young people know what they need and they know how to lead. This is why it is crucial to put the youth at the center of humanitarian action. I strongly encourage you all to share your thoughts today and actively participate in the discussions. Young people are counting on you. Now, I would like to welcome and pass the floor to the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Ms. Jayatma Wickramanayake. Thank you. Over to you, Jayatma.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone tuning in from around the world. Wherever you are, I hope you are well and you're safe and that you are taking care of your mental and physical health at this difficult time. It's my great pleasure to open this event on behalf of the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action. Let me thank OCHA and the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, the co-organizers of this Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Week, for including this event in the program and thereby recognizing the need to focus on young people and their meaningful inclusion in humanitarian action. It's a very timely discussion as we are dealing with a pandemic at a time where the world is home to the largest generation of young people ever, around 1.8 billion. In many humanitarian settings, adolescents, youth, and children constitute more than half of or 50% of the population in need. This is the crux, if not only the guidelines that Valentina mentioned, but also of the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action itself. As a collective, members of this compact have set out to transform humanitarian action with and for young people to prevent and end conflict, safeguard human rights and the rule of law, and invest in young people, leaving no one behind. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, this has become even more pressing task. The pandemic threatens to reverse decades-long progress made in areas of protection, participation, education, and health. And we have seen how pre-existing inequalities and vulnerabilities have now been exacerbated. The socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic, on top of this, are felt disproportionately by young people. Large scale disrupted learning, job losses, economic insecurity, heightened risk of exploitation and gender based violence, severe mental health challenges are just some of the areas that risk disrupting the lives of a whole entire generation. All of these impacts are further amplified in humanitarian contexts, as we know, where fragility, conflicts, and emergencies have undermined institutional capacity and limited access to services. Still, young people are not passively waiting for change to happen around them. Time and time again, young people step up and apply their many powerful assets to support and often lead humanitarian response in their communities with their skills, motivation, energy, creativity, a strong sense of justice, equality, a knack for technology, and a capacity for peer mobilization. With the COVID-19 pandemic, young people were some of the first responders to the crisis, creating positive change in their communities as health workers, advocates, volunteers, scientists, social entrepreneurs, and innovators. Young people like Valentina and our other youth speakers who are joining us today insist taking on action in places within systems that are not always designed for or designed to be inclusive of a diversity of stakeholders. I think many of us here on this call know of situations in which young people have been leading humanitarian action despite these limitations, be it after the earthquakes in Nepal or in relation to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa or the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all going through right now, just to be pushed out when the established humanitarian actors take over. And this is what we are trying to change, or it's that the compact is trying to change. The time to work with young people is now, and as young people say, nothing for young people without young people. So as institutions, governments, and humanitarian actors plan, implement, and monitor their response and recovery plans, they must meaningfully engage with young people right from the beginning to the end. So let me just highlight that this means not just a particular group of young people, but young people in all their diversity. Young migrants, young refugees, young people living with disabilities, girls and young women, young LGBTIQ people, young indigenous people, by taking into account the intersectional nature of their challenges and the layered discrimination they face, mostly due to their identities, but also the contextual knowledge and connection to local communities that they can often bring to the table. The United Nations recognizes this, and that we cannot achieve our mission without working with young people as equal partners. And we recognize that young people have a right to influence decisions that affect their lives. So our blueprint to do this is the UN's Youth Strategy, Youth 2030, and young people in humanitarian action, therefore, is one of the key priorities of the strategy. And now with the guidelines, we have taken an important step forward to transform this commitment of the UN's Youth Strategy into action-oriented guidance for stakeholders on the ground. Strategic and effective programming, informed by evidence and by the voices of youth, and driven and led by young people themselves, can help turn humanitarian situations into possibilities of transformation for individuals, for families, and for communities. So with less than 10 years to achieve the 2030 agenda, it's our responsibility as a system to create enabling spaces for young people to contribute to the SDGs, to the development of their communities by engaging as partners, including in humanitarian action. Thank you very much again for inviting me here today, and I look forward to the discussions. Over to you, Priya.
Thanks, Jayatma, and thanks, Valentina. Great examples, and you both have been so instrumental in the development and the entire journey of the IASC Youth Guidelines that we're going to talk about more today. So, really excited for you to set the stage. But in addition to Jayatma, your conversation and statement, I also want to play a video from our very own Youth Compact champion, Shahidullah Jaland from Jalalabad in Afghanistan. Shahid is in the chat with us, but unable to speak live because of connectivity issues. And Jayatma, we really hope to continue these conversations with you. I know you have to leave due to pressing commitments, but thank you again for being part of this entire journey with us. And please give me a few seconds and I'll try to put up Shahid's video so that everyone can hear his statement. And please post any questions, comments for him in the chat. He's very much part of this conversation with us today.
Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where are you in the world. My name is Shahid Zalan, a young social change maker and on-the-ground humanitarian actor from Afghanistan. I'm also one of the 20 Young People Youth Compact Champions program. Today I'll speak to you about my own experience of working with and for young people as a humanitarian actor, and will also shed a light on the importance of including young people, people with disabilities, and minorities in humanitarian action. I started my career in activism as an underground humanitarian back in 2015 by addressing displaced people affected by humanitarian crisis in conflict in my community. Since then, I have contributed a lot of my time to addressing the problems and needs of people affected by humanitarian crisis in conflict in my community. From social mobilization to program management, I have worked on a variety of roles with international humanitarian organizations, including UNICEF, NRC, and DRC. My passion and actions go beyond my professional work. Working with people in humanitarian action and humanitarian crisis affected communities has had a very profound impact on my mind and work to act more actively and galvanize more attention from the local government, NGOs, and other sectors involved in the field to address the problems and needs of the people, especially young people, more holistically and impactfully. And one of the initiatives that I can count on was initiating a literacy program, especially for those youth and children that were dropped out of school due to displacement and humanitarian crisis in their communities. During my work in activism and humanitarian action in crisis affected environments, I have noticed that how much important young people's contribution could be in difficult situation and in humanitarian action. Despite being mostly affected by a humanitarian crisis and being very effective in response to humanitarian crisis, young people are still excluded and their potential is largely untapped in humanitarian action. So today, I call upon all members of Compact, governments, and other NGOs to ensure young people's inclusion by not giving them the opportunity to practice their democratic values and rights, but also to fully engage them in humanitarian action and policy designing through their meaningful participation in existence. Invest in us because we are not asking for, but because it's our right. Invest in us because the future is ours. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Shahid. Thank you so much for such inspiring words and leaving us with this most amazing message that says invest in us and it is our right, and because this is our future and we want to be part of it with you. So with that, colleagues, we also want to share with you one more short video about the IASC youth guidelines, which will show you the journey we've taken, the work of the Youth Compact, and how the young people's views and ideas have inspired and been part of co-developing these IASC youth guidelines. So please give me a few more seconds and I will be sharing another short video with you after that, which we'll begin the rest of our session. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching these two dynamic videos, a statement from Shahid and the video of the IASC Youth Guidelines with us. This is the introductory part of our session, the setting the stage, and now we want to move forward to actually talking a little bit more about these guidelines with you all with some deep dive sessions. But before that, let's hear from my colleague Danielle Engel from UNFPA a little bit more about the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, under which umbrella these guidelines were developed. So over to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. My name is Danielle Engel, as Priya said. I'm leading the technical team on adolescent and youth in UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, and I'm also leading together with my colleague from IFSC, the International Federation of the Red Cross, the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, which has been mentioned a couple of times already in these sessions, and you're probably wondering what exactly is that. So let me give you a quick overview of what the Compact is and why it exists. Actually, the Compact, as it was mentioned, or I think also you could see it in the video, was launched at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016 in Istanbul, and it was really came out of a desire of the humanitarian sector to address better the needs and priorities of young people and engage young people more meaningfully in humanitarian action. At the time, around 30 agencies, humanitarian actors, member states, private sector entities, and most of all, youth-led organizations came together in Istanbul to sign off on the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, which has since grown to a really sizable partnership and network of over 60 humanitarian actors. You can see on the screen the 5 key actions which the Compact is trying to push forward. It's the hand, 5 actions for the Compact. We are looking at services. You already saw that in the video, and this is where the IASC guidelines, which we are presenting to you today, is really the, I could say the crown jewel of what we are doing in Action Area 1 services. And it was very much a promise kept from the ICPD, from the World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul. So we're really pleased to see these IASC guidelines come to life because they will really will provide the backbone of the rest of the work of the Compact. The other 4 actions kind of derive from these guidelines. One, the action 2 turns around participation, ensuring that young people, as Valentina said, and Shahid, are involved from the very get-go in, and I think Jayatma also referred to that, in the design of the response and the implementation, as well as later on the monitoring and the evaluation. For that, of course, young people need the right capacity. So Action Area 1 turns around, 3 turns around capacity, recognizing and strengthening young people's abilities to be effective humanitarian actors. Action Area 4 focuses on resources. All of this needs resources, needs attention at the global level, at the regional level, and at the country level. So this is the work which we're doing as a Compact in advocating for increased resources for this work. And then finally, but not lastly, but not last but not really least, is the area of data. So where we like to ensure that we have the right data available, age and sex disaggregated, so that we have a good understanding of how humanitarian crisis is affecting young people. So with that, I'd like to close in saying how pleased the Compact is of coming here and bringing this guidance now to the bigger humanitarian community. And if you have now been interested and curious about the work of the Compact and the work of this really dynamic network, and would like to join us, so I'll put in the chat a joining procedure. You can find it on the Youth Compact website, which is youthcompact.org, and you can have a look, and please get in touch if you'd like to join this work. Over to you again, Priya.
Great. Thanks, Danielle, for that intro to the Youth Compact. And colleagues, just so you know, when we were developing the IASC guidelines, it's really been a great development by both the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action and the IASC communities coming together, which meant the processes, the protocols, the engagement with both sides was kept equally active. We seeked endorsement from both parts of the House, and we developed this amazing standard with young people. So before we move to the next slide, let me share a bit of background around the IASC youth guidelines. I won't dwell too much on the video you all saw. But why these guidelines? Well, before this, we have had no internationally endorsed standards on young people in emergencies. This has been a big gap that we finally succeed in filling now with this guidance in place. And it has been a collective effort of many humanitarian actors, as we mentioned, partners, young people, civil society, youth led organizations. And as Jayatma said, adolescents, youth, and children constitute more than half the caseload in a humanitarian crisis. And during emergencies, we often see that young people are more likely to experience violence, abuse, neglect, loss of access to basic services, healthcare, education, most importantly, livelihood opportunities. On top of that, we've had COVID 19, and these contexts also further increase their risks for issues such as trafficking, recruitment into armed groups and armed forces, child marriage, unlawful detention, and gender based violence, and many other heinous forms of sexual exploitation and abuse. And at the same time, in many of these same situations, there are the young people who are an integral part of our communities to help resolve conflict, recover from disasters or violence, and find creative solutions to long-standing problems. Today, more than ever, young people are looking to the humanitarian community, to many of us listening in today, to protect them, to engage them, and to ensure that minimum standards are in place. Specifically, that's the reason we developed these IASC youth guidelines to address their needs and priorities across all sectors, across all phases of the humanitarian program cycle, and to engage them meaningfully and ensure their participation in our work and programs. So, with that, we'll go to the next slide. When you all take a look at the IASC guidelines, and my colleague will just place the chat in the chat the link we've already shared with all of you. If you take a look at these IASC guidelines, youth guidelines more deeply, you will see the division is across the 5 key section areas, which are very much in line with the pillars of the compact that Danielle mentioned as well. We also have a very rich annex, specifically where we developed another interagency guidance on working with young people during COVID-19 last year. And in these sections, you will see they're mainly divided into making the case, key principles, meaningful participation, working with young people across the humanitarian program cycle, and implementing adolescent and youth programming across sectors. And in each of these various sections, you will find country examples, case studies, excellent resources and tools that we've developed and crowdsourced from many partners. So it's very practical and an action oriented guidance for you and not theoretical. And this was really kept to its life because young people asked us to make sure, and many humanitarian asked us to make sure we had very good examples that could be replicated or contextualized or adapted in other settings in various levels, phases of emergencies. So do take a look at the guidelines later so that you can learn more. And we also have some key messages for you from at the end of this session. But a little bit more about each section. So the first section, the introduction, emphasizes on making the case. Why do we need to work with young people? Who is our target audience for these guidelines? How should organizations apply this guidance in the work they're doing, be it education or protection or health, etc.? There are also great narratives in here for your funding proposals or your appeals or your humanitarian response plans. So again, it allows you to, and it gives you a lot of the overall information that you're looking for. Section B is about key principles. We'll wait for that till we go to the next slide. Section C is about meaningful participation, not tokenistic, not unsafe and not unethical, but actually the opposite of that. And what does that mean? Where we will learn the modes of participation, be it consultative or collaborative or completely youth led, and what can be applied in the different contexts that you all face. Sometimes participation is not considered safe, or it's not considered ethical, or it can be merely tokenistic. And those are the examples we're trying to share with colleagues of what not to do and how to do it better and how to do it well as we share with you the strategic areas for ensuring young people's participation, be it in influencing laws and policies, building capacities and skills, addressing social norms, and supporting mechanisms and opportunities for participation, and creating the space for them to have a voice. Again, I'd recommend for colleagues to read the guidelines, as you'll find very good examples from the field to help inspire your programs and activities in this section. And then section D is about how young people can be involved and engaged across the different phases of the humanitarian program cycle, from needs assessment to strategic planning to resource mobilization to implementing and monitoring and reporting. Here again, we have strong examples of youth led assessments during emergencies, participatory action research, youth led program evaluations, and so on. So, again, we try to see how we try to work with and engage young people across different sectors of our work in programming. Section E is probably the bulkiest section of the guidelines, which is about implementing adolescent and youth responsive programming across sectors. We also call these our sector tip sheets, where again, colleagues, depending on the different areas of work that you're in, education or protection or health or nutrition or wash, etc., you can take those tip sheets and see how what are the key priorities you can include for young people across all phases of the HPC, the humanitarian program cycle, and also tips for engaging young people across all those phases. We will go into all of these issues, or we'll discuss some of these main bulky sections in the working groups that we're going to initiate shortly. With that, we'll go to the next slide, please. Just elaborating here on one of the sections, which is section B in the guidelines on key principles. These were very much informed by the consultations with young people themselves, many of them young displaced refugees and migrants across 25 countries. These principles are about changing our narrative and engaging young people as positive agents of change, engaging them meaningfully, as we just discussed, and safely, and not for tokenism, ensuring inclusivity across all their diversities, as Jayatma spoke about, be it gender, sexual orientation, disability, etc., and most importantly, applying a do no harm and human rights based approach at all times. So again, encouraging colleagues to please look at this section. This also comes with good tips and resources for further information that you want. Next slide, please. So when we launched the guidelines in February of 2021, we had several of our principals, USG Mark Lowcock, governments, donors, member states. We had principals from UNICEF, UNHCR, NRC, and IFRC, and many young people, including young refugees, young people with disabilities, to come together to share their experiences, share their commitments on how we're going to work with and continue working with young people in humanitarian action. And this is a snapshot that you see in front of you of their commitment to make and to work with young people as equal partners and engage them in different areas, again, from their agencies and organizational priority perspective. So this is a snapshot after we had launched the guidelines. And of course, because we talk about young people, we can't do anything non-youthful. So this is a youthful way of bringing to you a visual note-taking experience and example where we developed all of these calls to action and commitments from young people, from various stakeholders during the launch. And you can see all of the stakeholders who were present and who pledged or committed to working, engaging, including young people as partners, addressing their needs and priorities across sectors. So again, this shows us that all the high levels and senior leaders of our agencies are very much engaged, very much looking at this area and ensuring that young people, adolescents, and youth are engaged in our humanitarian programs. With that, I would like to now turn to my colleagues Kayla and Valentina. Kayla from NRC and Valentina, our co-moderator, to ask some questions so that we can engage the audience more. Thanks. Over to you, Kayla and Valentina.
Thanks very much, Priya. Hi, everyone. I'm Kayla Glass from the Norwegian Refugee Council, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. And I thank you so much for joining us. Now that we've heard a bit about the Youth Compact and the IASC Youth Guidelines on working with and for young people in humanitarian action, we've also heard from inspiring youth champions and the Secretary General's envoy on youth. Now it's time for us to hear from you and to seek your active participation in the session. So using the chat box, I see some of you have already input there a bit. But using the chat box, we would love to collect some of your ideas and raise a few questions and hear back from you on your thoughts about youth in humanitarian and protracted crises. So you'll see the first question come up on screen. In one or two words, what do you perceive to be the main issues for young people in humanitarian and protracted crisis? So put your responses into the chat. I think we have about 45 or 60 seconds. And let your creativity unfurl here. Perhaps you feel there's maybe a lack of visibility for the issues of youth, lack of inclusion. Maybe youth aren't seen as the agents of change that we all know that they can be. We see that the recognition and support for the great work of young people is maybe missing. Young people sometimes aren't trusted. Yeah, there's a lack of trust there. Sometimes youth could feel isolated, lack of co-designing programs, and young people only seen as beneficiaries or people with kind of needs instead of capacities to make a change. We need to see more space in decision-making. Again, we see lack of trust, as we saw before, lack of understanding, and really kind of missing the opportunity to build on the capacities of youth and the positive examples that youth can bring to us. So moving from that one, now that you've gotten warmed up, we'll go into the second question. You'll see it again on the slide. In one or two words, describe what meaningful youth engagement in humanitarian action would look like. So what would it look like to engage youth fully and completely in humanitarian action? Perhaps it would be having a platform for youth to raise their voice, empowering, trusting youth to take on lead roles, looking for creativity, asking youth to take decisions, and ensuring inclusion in decision-making. We see a lot around decision-making here, that's great. Looking for mentorship opportunities, co-designing of programs, looking for opportunities for youth to lead, just creating more space in general for youth, youth voices, young people. Yeah, this is wonderful. We have a lot of ideas here. So I turn you now over to Valentina to continue with your creative ideas. Valentina, to you.
Thank you, Kayla. Wow, we are having so many inputs. I appreciate your participation. We are going to go into the third questions of this discussion. Erica, can you play the next slide, please? Yes, there we go. In one or two words, describe the unique added value that young people bring to their communities. We have about 60 seconds to answer this. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat box. Creative solution, yes. Hope of tomorrow, change, energy. That comes a lot. That's true. Innovation. Jigyasa says grassroots knowledge. We have Ria saying new and evolving ideas. Yes, I agree. Skills, boldness, enthusiasm, inspiration. We are having so many great ideas, and I agree. Also, technology, the role of young people in technology is quite remarkable. Amazing. Working with passion, that's also true. Now, because of time, we are going to move into the fourth and last question of this discussion. Next slide, please. Yes. So again, what entry point in your area of work do you foresee to apply these IASC youth guidelines? Is there any project, program, activity that you foresee these guidelines to be applied that you can think of? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat. We have John Mark saying needs assessment, program design, which is also very, very important. Also in writing the strategy that builds on youth, we have someone else touching on that point. Jigyasa from the Youth Compact Champion says also data collection, which is a key point as well. I see John again saying monitoring and complaints feedback mechanism. That's also another key area that youth participation should be included. Also, Sarah Morelli says decision of local partners. We have another comment saying community participation and localization. Well, thank you so much for your participation. And now we are going to move forward into more amazing discussions. Over to you, Priya.
Thanks, Valentina, and thanks, Kayla, for moderating that discussion. And it's really great to see how colleagues shared some of the challenges, issues you see on the ground, and barriers on working with young people, engaging them in humanitarian response and action, but also some of the opportunities and entry points that we see. And that brings us right on point to the next part of our session, which is some deep dives that we want, or just some discussions we want to have with smaller groups of people and give a chance to colleagues to actually speak and share their experience or interact with us and ask questions. So with that, we are going to move into a breakout room exercise. Many of you familiar with the Zoom and virtual realities have been part of these breakout room discussions and working group discussions. So we have 3 working groups. You can see the titles in front of you, which are also various sections of the IASC Youth Guidelines as we spoke. You'll find out more about these topics, hear about a country example from UNICEF, from UNFPA, and from the Global Refugee Youth Network, specifically related to a Uganda example. And then you'll engage with discussion with our working group moderators, Mette from the Office of the SG's Envoy on Youth, Danielle from UNFPA, and Kate Mahoney from the Women's Refugee Commission. And you will have about 30 minutes to be in the breakout room and come back, and we will be asking our moderators and presenters to please share key highlights with us. Again, Tamara has been posting in the chat that we'll be able to share recordings, presentations, everything with you all later. So no need to worry. We'll compile everything and be able to email everybody so that you have record, and you can also share or hear what other working groups discussed. We urge you to stay in to please go on the bottom right of your screen, where you will see 3 breakout rooms already pop up around meaningful participation, programming with and for young people across sectors, and engaging with young people during COVID. Our moderators have been assigned. We have country presenters, and we will be here in these breakout rooms for 30 minutes, and then we'll bring you back into plenary. Please don't leave us. It's going to be a great session after. Thank you. And please feel free to join your working groups. Otherwise, Tamara will start to assign you all soon. Thank you.
and civil participation is alarmingly low in Jordan, yet critically so important. Very few young people in Jordan, around 8% for boys and 4% for girls, participate in their communities. And this is considered a cause of concern and warrants urgent and needed action for scaling up programming for adolescents and youth engagement. Today in Jordan, especially for the most vulnerable young people in Jordan, we have limited access for opportunities to engage them in their communities and improve their employability skills and support their positive transition to adulthood. And young people have continuously stressed the need for civic and social engagement opportunities to enable them practice, further develop, and acquire skills. And there's a constant and urgent investment in working with young people in Jordan, keeping them in the center. And the guidelines are setting the standards, and the principles are very much at the heart of and the core of what we do, keeping young people in the heart, reaching them at scale, and giving them meaningful engagement opportunities. We view and we focus on adolescent strength, and we grow those to provide them with their fair and equal chance to be engaged in their communities. Next slide, please. One example of how we're supporting mechanisms for participation is the creation of the volunteering national platform in Jordan called Nahnu. The idea came as a response to issues and challenges that came from young people themselves to have more platforms for participation and engagement, but also to spend their free time in meaningful engagement opportunities, to gain skills, to build something systematic that they can participate in, and to be able to be better prepared for the future. Youth led the process from the beginning. They led it from researching to designing to planning and implementing the program. And through this program, we managed to bring together the government, civil society, NGOs, INGOs, UN, and private sector and young people to create a generation of engaged and empowered young people through equitable access to opportunities to learn and acquire employability, technical, personal empowerment, and citizenship skills. This platform and this program was built with sustainability in mind and scalability. It was built based on existing structures and systems and adopted by the government in Jordan. And the platform Nahnu was selected to be the national platform for volunteering under COVID-19 response with the government of Jordan. And as you can see here on the slide, those are some of the results that we are proud of achieving. We have more than 60,000 registered young people in a manner of 2 years. With more than 66% girls participating, supported by more than 360 partners, including government, private sectors, NGOs, and logging over 1.6 million hours of volunteering in areas of their interest or areas of need in their communities. And in everything we do, we focus on the foundational principles, leaving no one behind. This especially applies for the adolescents and youth who face multiple deprivations and have limited access to meaningful and engagement opportunities. This is why UNICEF adopted a vulnerability and inclusive approach in line with the guidelines. And in everything we do, our focus on minimizing the impact of youth most at risk, including those who live in refugee camps and disadvantaged communities such as ITSs, we call them informal tented settlements, as well as vulnerable groups, including girls and children with disabilities, to ensure that they are provided with equal opportunities to access various platforms to be supported and engaged through. Next slide, please. Through our program, we offer a comprehensive and multi-sectoral holistic package of services tailored to the needs of young people, following a multi-sectorality approach aspect and bringing all stakeholders to the table, engaging all sectors, embedding youth engagement across board, and collaborating with other UN agencies such as WHO, UNFPA, WFP, and UNDP, and other key partners such as NRC in the camps. We engage at national level with government, and this is also fostering social cohesion by bringing young people from host community refugees population to unite together, to work together, and innovate and solve problems they face in their communities. The principles section of the guidelines tell us that we need to ensure meaningful participation and give away power. And through our initiatives on engaging young people in response to COVID-19 outbreak in Jordan, young people were engaged in preparedness, response, and now hopefully in recovery. UNICEF COVID response has mobilized young people, majority of them were girls, to respond directly to the pandemic through frontline intergenerational work, as well as online through community-focused communication and awareness efforts on virus prevention. They have designed, planned, and led initiatives to support their communities and help their peers cope with the new realities, including mental health support through our digital engagement campaigns. And volunteers in Jordan were mobilized to act on planning COVID response. As you can see some of those results on the screen. More than 46,000 supported raising awareness about COVID-19 in their communities. They supported distributing informational packages, and this work reached over 100,000 young people across Jordan through different platforms. And they also supported raising awareness on the importance of the vaccines and helped the government in their national efforts to vaccinate the population at scale, and supported elderly in registering on the national vaccine portal. Next slide, please. So some of the success factors that we have been witnessing so far, and those are really at the heart of the guidelines and its principles. Programming is with and not just for young people. Through our programs, we made sure that we designed them from the beginning in an inclusive manner, engaging young people throughout all the stages so that our programs become responsive to what they want, aligning with the government strategies to ensure sustainability and building on existing structures. The joint advocacy efforts we had with everyone, including UN agencies and key national partners such as NRC, to bring this to the attention of the government and hopefully make those changes in the laws and the bylaws. Convening partners and leveraging resources, we brought together everyone, and we brought private sector, which is non-traditional partner for us before. And we kept trying until we got all the right partners on board to join our efforts in engaging young people, all through making sure that we are generating evidence, producing those data that will help us to ensure effective and efficient program response, and making sure that we are building that investment case for investing in young people and changing laws and regulations in relation to their engagement. We've, of course, faced a lot of challenges throughout the way, but we try to address those through our engagement with our partners to help bring solutions to those pressing challenges. Reaching the most vulnerable has always been a challenge for us, for those who do not have access to internet. Yet, although the program captured a significant proportion for the total population of young people, we're still trying to provide those young people with access to data packages, tablets, to enhance their access and meaningful participation and learning. And private sectors are being mobilized to address this challenge and help us ensure that those young people remain connected. Next slide, please. To support us finally making those opportunities for young people and ensuring that we're building on those successes, we are really emphasizing on supporting this co-creation of transformed engagement programs for young people, not the traditional way, but really looking at scale, sustainable programs that ensure everyone is engaged and we're leaving no one behind. We're looking a lot on improving data and analysis to help us enable targeting of those relevant barriers and bottlenecks specific to each vulnerable group. Shifting to a vulnerability approach has to increase the potential to engage those who are left behind and increase cost effectiveness and sustainability in our programs. Multi and cross-sectoral planning, as I mentioned, addressing the many complex and intertwined causes for adolescents and youth vulnerabilities, as well as the need to create synergies between interventions for optimal outcomes, requires multi and cross-sectoral approaches. And this is where we're looking at UNICEF comparative advantage in programming. Finally, what we wanted to also make sure that we're doing is that our programs really are at scale and ensuring sustainability of those programs. And we're trying to embed everything that we're doing within the government system and moving away from, designed and implemented projects, 1 or 2 years project, to really supporting sustained and at-scale youth and adolescents intervention, led and implemented by national partners and with the support, of course, of young people throughout the way. Young people do not need us to support them today and only once. They need us to be by their side along the way, to nurture them, to encourage them, and to give them those platforms to enable their full participation and engagement. I really cannot stress enough how important it has been in our context to work with these dynamic young people in understanding their challenges, defining opportunities and solutions together, removing those barriers that are hindering their engagement, and in particular in humanitarian settings, but most importantly, to ensure that we are working with and for young people. Thank you very much, and over to you, Mette.
Thank you so much, Bisan. So I want to we have around 8 minutes. I want to just open the floor for any input, questions, reflections. As you can see on the slide, we do have 3 questions. Also, please feel free to add in the chat. I see we probably don't have time for everyone to speak, so any input is greatly appreciated. But I'll start by inviting Sarah, who raised her hand. Sarah, feel free.
Yeah, thank you very much, mate, and thank you. I can't remember your name for sharing. I just had a question, and again, I do not know if maybe perhaps you shared it and I missed it. So you said that you are okay. You're supporting the whole volunteering system within Jordan. However, I wanted to just find out from you if Jordan has a policy that governs volunteerism, because over time we've seen young people who are engaged as volunteers, but in a way are exploited. So yeah, do you have a policy in Jordan to support that? Thank you.
Shall we answer one by one, or maybe we take all questions?
Maybe we take a couple. I also want to say that Sherin has asked in the chat, and this is for you as well, Bisan. Can you reflect on the participation of youth with disabilities? How did they participate? Was there any adaptation to ensure their participation? I think that's a very important question.
Absolutely. So for youth with disability, we absolutely started from the beginning designing the programs, taking in mind the participation of young people with disabilities. We've tailored it. So our programs, whether it's being done offline or online now, we're adjusting them to ensure that young people with disability have access to those services. With our centers, when we had to deliver the programs offline, all our centers, all our content were made as well in a manner where we address the different disabilities in young people. Online now, what we're trying to do is to transfer all our digital content to fit also visual and hearing, disabilities for young people. We started some programs already in shifting them, and we're continuing to do that. With the outreach for young people with disabilities, we're partnering as well with the National Disability Center in the country, and our partners continue to support us to reach out to this vulnerable community.
Thank you, Bisan. Then let me invite Simon.
Thank you so much, Bisan, for the presentation. I will go to the 3 questions here. The first one is, how do we see some of these key principles incorporated into your work? I think the first thing is information. Information is key in making sure that what is written down here is known by the young people. So once we get the young people to get to know about what is happening here, they will be part of the process. Then the second thing is having clearly stated goals. When we have clear goals and objectives that we share together with the young people, and we actually involve them in drafting these processes together, not us staying somewhere and then drafting the objectives and the goals for them. It will not be owned by them. But when we draft these things together, it will be very good. Lastly is having measurable outcomes. Accountability is key. If we have measurable outcome with the young people, and then we can engage some of these principles into the work of the humanitarian work that we do, or in the sector we work in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simon. Indeed, accountability is key. Thank you for those reflections. Then we have Ayushi from Red R India. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Please come in.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, and you have perfectly pronounced my name. My name is Ayushi Bhatnagar, and I'm from Red R India, Pune. We are a humanitarian not-for-profit organization based in India. Currently, we are working in Maharashtra, which is one of the highest number of COVID reported, which has the highest number of COVID reported cases. So working with youth is a very important thing, because we need young people to come up and participate, because they sort of provide us with real-time information and also help in more community engagements. the gap that I see here is related to capacity building opportunities of youths. And if provided with the right amount of opportunities, youth will be able to emerge from the rural corners of the country and participate much better. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. Very important reflections relating to capacity building, definitely. I saw we had a question in the chat before from Charlotte. I think it's for you, Bisan, if you needed a needs assessment. With that being said, I see that we're being moved back to the plenary in 50 seconds, but maybe you can just mention a couple of words before adjusting the program is what Charlotte is asking.
Oops, sorry. So I was saying, yes, absolutely. We've done the needs assessment and it was done with young people. We call them the Participatory Action Research Youth, and they helped us in the needs assessment before we started the program and throughout the way. We do yearly checks and we do yearly, measurement and routine monitoring of the program, and they support us throughout the way to make needed changes.
Okay, so colleagues, welcome everyone to breakout room 2, where we'll be looking at programming with and for young people, that section of the guidance. The way this is going to work is I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what is in that section of the guidance, and then we'll have my colleague Ashram from Bangladesh will give you a case example of how this is implemented right now in Cox's Bazar, and then we'll have a moment where we can come together and discuss. So let me start with just giving you a little bit of an overview of the key programming approaches which we recommend to be applied across sectors when we program with and for young people in all phases of the humanitarian program cycle. So first of all, we recommend to take a life course approach, putting the young person in the center and her or his particular situation and her particular life phase in the center of our programming, and recognizing that young people are moving through a specific time of their lives, which brings challenges and opportunities. We also recommend strongly to take gender targeted and gender transformative approaches, so not forgetting that young girls have different lived realities than young boys or young men, and bring this into our programming. A third element is building human, social, and financial capital in everything we do in the programming which we are designing. And integrate across clusters and sectors, and that is for anyone who has been working on adolescent and youth. Programming is of course central. Young people are, have many different necessities and priorities which span across sectors, and that's why we really need to foster integration between the different sectors. Same goes for the humanitarian development and peace nexus. Of course, these programs do not only apply on humanitarian or play in a vacuum of humanitarian or development. Often we are faced with fluid situations of protected crisis, of resilience building, of preparing for the next humanitarian crisis to arrive. And so we really need to work across these different areas between humanitarian development, peace, the famous nexus. And then finally, and probably one of the most critical and most important elements of approaches which this guidance is advocating for, and that is partnering with young people themselves, in particular youth organizations and youth networks from the get-go, and to really get a sense of what makes sense for young people themselves, and how can they be driving the process together with us as humanitarian actors. If we now look at the humanitarian program cycle, there are 5 elements to it, and we advocate in these guidelines to include young people in each and every piece of this, in each and every step of the way in all of these elements. And the first one is needs assessment and analysis. young people have a role to play. A second one is young people can help us in the strategic planning of what needs to happen. Young people can also help in mobilizing resources, be that financial, but also human and other resources at the local and regional and even global level. The fourth one is young people can be involved very effectively in the implementation of the response, but also in monitoring of the response to make sure that what is happening and what is implemented really serves the needs of their community and their peers, and they can give us valuable insight in how appropriate the intervention which we are proposing in the response are for them. And then finally, the last element is involving young people also in the evaluation of any response in terms of peer reviews, in terms of including them as researchers, including them as key informants of to have a good understanding of how the response went and what impact it had on young people and their realities. So now I'd like to give you a snapshot on what you can find in the guidance document itself. As Priya already mentioned in the plenary, we are looking at each and every sector. We have what we call the tip sheets for each sector. And so this is really the core and the heart of the guidance, I would imagine. So let me go back. So I'll give you the example of the education sector. You can see on the left, you'll have the humanitarian program cycle phases, the ones which I just mentioned, the need assessment, the strategic planning. And you'll always have, for each phase, you'll always have some indication of what can be done, in this case, collect data, or ensure that education response plan addresses the needs, so focusing on the response plan. And then you'll have an additional column on the right, which are some key tips on how you can ensure that young people can participate in each and every of these steps. And you can see these are some ideas of just to spark the imagination of what that could look like. And I think here you have the next one: resource mobilization, implementation, monitoring, and the needs assessment. And again, you have some key what to do, but also some key tips. I'll give you another example. This one is the GBV example for the protection sector. Again, it's structured exactly along the same lines with the humanitarian program cycle phases. What could you do? What should you do? And then some key tips for youth participation. We hope by structuring it in this way, the guidelines are really hands-on. They can really help humanitarian actors who work in the field. You need to very quickly come up with a program, give them quick ideas and very practical intervention, which you can nearly copy and paste into their programs or adapt very, very easily. And if that is the case, then that is Ashraf, my colleague Ashraf, who works in Cox's Bazar for UNFPA. He can tell us how useful these guidance are actually at the grassroots level, and that is where we want these guidelines, of course, to be used in the response, in the direct response at the field level. And I would like to hand over to him so that he can give us an idea of what does this mean in practice, and what are the obstacles he is seeing in terms of programming with and for young people in a humanitarian crisis such as the one in Cox's Bazar. Ashraf, over to you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Hi, colleagues. This is Ashraf. I work with UNFPA with adolescent and youth unit here in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. So thank you, Danielle, again. So I will share our experience from Cox's Bazar, how we have been utilizing this IASC youth guideline, and what are the challenges we're facing and all. So let me give you the background of like the Cox's Bazar context and how we are working here. So it is a protected humanitarian crisis. Many of you may know this is the humanitarian response. Like a massive influx happened back in 2017, August 2017, but the crisis actually started in 1978. Close to 900,000 Rohingya refugees living in Cox's Bazar who actually escaped attacks in Myanmar, and here in Cox's Bazar, almost 1.3 million people are in need, including host community people and these 900,000 refugees. And surprisingly, or not actually surprising, that's the fact. Like young people consist 38% of this total population, which is like 10 to 24 years old young people, and which is a like big number. And if we go to the next slide, Daniel. Yes, so here are some of the key initiatives that we have taken so far from Cox's Bazar. So here we develop like joint response plan every year, and before doing that, we do the multi-sectoral need assessment, and young people are consulted and engaged in this process heavily, and they express what are the needs they want the humanitarian actors come up with, and what types of program they want in their community and all. So they are always consulted, and which is important. And also all the sectors, they collect age and sex segregated data from the response activities. Like there are some gaps, and the youth working group is working tirelessly to minimize this gap, working with all the sector coordinators. And also I'm happy to inform you that here we have a youth working group established. It's a very active cross-sectoral youth working group which coordinates all the youth related activities in this response. And also during this COVID-19 pandemic, young people are actually at the heart of response. Like they are disseminating messages regarding COVID-19 awareness and all, and like they are at the front line. And also here from the youth working group, we try to maintain that all the programs will be like young people will be engaged in all the programs. And there are many examples where young people are heavily engaged in program design, program monitoring, and also like the program implementation at the front line. You will see like many youth peer leaders who are like co-teaching like their peers, and also taking all the like groundbreaking initiatives in their communities. So the next slide, Daniel. So here are some other examples. So we have developed a roadmap of adolescent and youth activities in Cox's Bazar, so that all the youth actors can have some sort of guidance, like what types of youth initiatives they can take here in Cox's Bazar, what works, what not, what are the core competencies and all. And also young people, they are heavily engaged in youth-led advocacy campaign across all the sectors, including theater for development, photojournalism and all. And very recently from the youth working group, we have started developing a youth advisory panel for ensuring meaningful youth engagement. They will be providing suggestions, solutions to all the sector coordinators of sector initiatives, so that young people's voice are heard. And also we are deploying youth working group focal points in all the camps and also in the host communities for ensuring better coordination at the grassroots level. And also, we have taken another initiative to ensure social cohesion among the host community and the refugee community. And young people are also here coming up with like innovative solutions by themselves. And also, we have taken an initiative to develop multi-sectoral skill development task force, because here young people, want to learn many skills, but there are service gaps. So we have developed a skill development framework, and this multi-sectoral skill development task force has been developed to implement that skill development framework with the young people, so that they have the correct tools and correct resources, knowledge, and skills to fulfill their all potential. Next slide. Daniel, next slide, please. Yes. Now I'm going to share some lessons learned from the Cox's Bazar with all of you. So what we have learned is cross-sectoral collaboration is really, really crucial. If we want to ensure meaningful youth engagement, we have to work with all the sector coordinators, other key stakeholders. We have to engage them in some kind of discussion, so that they know like how young people should be engaged in all the activities. And also, advocacy is important, and that should be continuous. That advocacy should be with the government, with the key community stakeholders, religious leaders, with all other humanitarian actors and all. It should be continuous. So continuous advocacy should be there. And last but not least, we should invest time, resources, energy to build capacity of the actors, because many cases they think like young people should be engaged in the program, which is only designed for like youth development or meaningful youth engagement or all. But that's not the case. We see from this IASC youth guideline, young people can be engaged in any kind of sector initiative. That could be from wash sector, from food security, from disaster risk reduction, any sector. So there are rooms where young people can come up with innovative solutions. They can engage from all the like program design, monitoring, implementations, evaluations, and everywhere. So there are rooms, there are ways, and this capacity building is necessary. So that's all from me from Cox's Bazar. Over to Daniel again.
Yes, thank you, Ashraf. It's just so valuable to get the first-hand feedback from the field, from people who are really implementing programs, and how this can be, how the guidelines are useful or not, and how this can be adapted to bring about real change at the response level. So we're now moving into the more interactive piece of this breakout session. We have 15 more minutes to discuss we have selected 2 questions. Let me go to the first question. In your experience, what are some of the entry points to work with young people in the different phases of the humanitarian program cycle? So as you can see on the screen, Ashraf will take notes as we speak. So just go ahead and let us know what, from your experience and from where you sit, what do you think are the key entry points?
Hello.
Okay.
Can I say something? Am I being heard?
You are heard, so please say your name.
Right. I'm Jan Söleman. I'm from Plan International. Relatively new to the humanitarian space, so it's not that I'm necessarily speaking out of experience there on what works best. For me, it's also a question on what are my open questions on that. I work mostly in economic space and employment and entrepreneurship, so my entry point obviously would be a little bit of analysis work and participatory research with youth on economic opportunities. That could, for example, also start happening when you involve youth in identifying needs on household level or community level, to take a view on expenditure baskets, what are consumption patterns in these households, all information that sort of helps people to make economic decisions in what can be produced or not. However, I also want to point out that I think that if you look across the sector, I don't think there is good and hands-on guidance specifically for humanitarian programs that are often relatively short program cycles on how you would start that up. Quite often I see that humanitarian teams, especially if they work on this ad hoc programming basis, they don't go much in depth when it comes to initial analysis. There is mostly this mentality of a lack of time, but also then need a guidance if they don't have that initial analysis on how to involve youth to fill those gaps up and how to represent the data meaningfully. So capacities for this participatory research is something that is still missing in order to get to my first entry point in a good way, if you know what I mean.
I think it's a very good point, and also, where the principle of, the famous nexus comes into play, where, we in doing the development area, we can develop participatory research mechanisms so that
exactly this links directly also to skills that would help youth to connect better to a larger development agenda. If you think about, I don't know, stuff like cook stoves or solar systems and whatever, these are all sorts of goods that are needed on a household basis. You have market-based approaches, more or less knocking on the doors of these refugee camps these days, but they don't know how to get in there, and there's this certain barrier. So how do you get youth involved there? It's an interesting question, and I've seen that there are good examples out there, but there is no comprehensive agenda that actually looks mostly or with a dedication to youth approaches in this economic space, specifically when it comes to very marginalized groups and low educational backgrounds. I think also the examples that we saw here now in this session are involving youth that have a relatively high educational standard, or at least some educational standard, and are not per se hit by a crisis, right? They are not necessarily like Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, coming from a rural area, being traumatized, and then ending up in a refugee camp in Bangladesh. So how do you work with those groups specifically in humanitarian action would for me be an interesting point to open up.
Thank you. I'm sorry, because I'm sharing my screen, I cannot really see all of you on the screen. So you need to come in, just shout out if you'd like to come in, reacting to what the colleague from Plan just said, also to his question of how to involve young people who are directly affected by a humanitarian crisis, and and pertaining to often to minority groups, vulnerable groups.
Hello, can you hear me?
Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Penelope. So I'm not also an expert on humanitarian issues, but I agree with our colleague. Especially, I wanted to say that for me, it is very important to conduct maybe outreach activities to explain to young people what are we doing there, why do we need their support, their ideas also, and so that the collaboration and their participation is really relevant. Also to have their trust, I think. This was my idea, my thoughts especially about the first phase of the program cycle.
Hi, Danielle, it's Priya. I'd like to come in.
Yes, Priya, go ahead.
Thanks. I joined in the middle of the conversation, sorry, but hearing I think Jan from Plan and Penelope, I'd also just like to add that absolutely, I think when we all take a deeper look at the IASC youth guidelines and the examples we see, of course, things have to be very context specific and not a cut and paste approach. And in some contexts, it may not be as safe to include or relevant to include young people right away in that specific program or sector response that we are planning. But I think, and also, and sometimes we have young people who are not comfortable being part of those discussions because they are either themselves vulnerable or have faced violence, etc. And I think that's where we need to really identify which are the right times and the right groups to be working with, including trying to speak up for those who do not wish to come up front or are feeling vulnerable and actually want more services. And that's why there are two things that I want to mention here. Here, it is also about addressing young people's priorities priorities in our sectors or in our areas of work, not just engaging young people, but actually providing them the actual services so that they can, avail those services as well, be it healthcare or protection mechanisms or referral pathways or support for their mental health, psychosocial support. So we shouldn't, I know we have been and we should continue to say we have to include them and engage them, but it's also about providing the services and addressing their specific needs, because we know that in many humanitarian situations, that is the first point. And we're just trying to say that, as gender responsive and as youth responsive our programs can be, and as much as we can take into account their needs in our humanitarian needs assessments or overviews, we can get a better picture of who needs support and who we can engage with in the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Priya. Important point also on the timing, as Ashraf probably can also testify to. I think there's also a need for us as humanitarian actors, or as working in the humanitarian space, to create space with our colleagues at the humanitarian steering committee, in the clusters, etc., to create space for this participatory research, for bringing in young people at the very beginning of the crisis. I think, Jan, to your point, when a crisis hit, everyone is running around and trying to quickly bring together a program and a response, and it's not that easy, or it's easier. It sounds easier than it is to create a space for young people to come in, because what we often hear is, we are busy saving lives here. You stay with your consultative approach, stay in the queue when we have time to address this. So that is, I think, a real challenge which we saw in Cox's Bazar, for example. But did I hear anyone else wanted to come in?
So Danielle, we have less than 2 minutes. Do you want to go to the next question, probably? In the interest of time.
I would just stay with this one question, and because I don't think into.
I think so. Yeah, then go ahead.
And maybe a quick follow-up comment if there's nobody else.
I wanted to say something.
Okay, Eric. Please,
thank you. Thank you so much. I think for me, I was just trying to also build on what Priya was mentioning from the needs assessment. In addition to making the context specific, we have to also make it gender age specific, because in as much as we are talking about young people in general, I think the needs are completely different. So in terms of the involvement, we have to base that based on gender and based on age. I think this is something that came out from most of the examples. This is something for us we have also been doing. I work on gender-based violence issues. So every time we're talking about, young people, there's always a deliberate focus to concentrate on women and girls particularly, especially when it comes to sexual violence, like Priya mentioned in the presentation. So in addition to context specific, we have to also base it based on gender, based on specific needs. This is something that I wanted to add. But also, I think for me, another thing we need to be looking at is in terms of what happens when these needs assessments are done. I think this is something we have also been working with whenever we do this assessment at the evaluation level. When you identify gaps, how can we really engage young people in taking up some of these actions? So in terms of partnering with the young people to address their needs, I think it's also important, something as an entry point. So when we do this assessment, we identify what the needs are. We should engage young people in taking up this action. If it requires even partnering with them on projects to implement some of these actions, is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And that's it. Jan, I'm sorry, but we are nearly at the end. I would give you the floor, but you might be...
No problem.
But if you can very quickly say what you wanted to follow up on.
No, it was just this intersectionality of issues that was addressed or mentioned, that there's so many problems and we have to address them all at the same time, more or less. Also sort of has the opportunity to introduce capacities that, are addressing more or less a variety of issues. If you think about complexity and solving problems and so on, these are things that you can have an economic purpose. It's problem-solving skills, but you can apply them in very different problem settings. So if you want to address norms barriers, it's an analysis as any other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kayla. Welcome to the breakout session focused on engaging young people during the COVID-19 pandemic. I kindly would ask everyone to turn off your video, and I think everyone has it off, and mute yourself so we can all focus on presentations. We'll have a presentation from Farida, and then we'll have time at the end of our session to be able to have some discussion amongst all of us. I'm Kate Mahoney, and I work with Women's Refugee Commission on refugee youth engagement, and I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to draw your attention to the annex of the IASC guidelines that focuses on working with and for young people during the COVID-19 pandemic. There's also a standalone guidance that goes into more detail on the same information. These guidelines highlight how the pandemic has impacted young people, and they also recommend key actions for how to respond in a way that's both youth sensitive and that involves young people themselves. In many humanitarian contexts during the pandemic, NGOs, UN agencies, and government actors have had to restrict the movement of their national and international staff due to quarantines or stay-at-home orders. And this has meant that it's really seriously constrained the provision of services. And into this vacuum, this lack of services has stepped young people, including refugees, migrants, and nationals, and those who are internally displaced. They have assessed the needs of their communities and taken action to address them. From the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've heard about how older persons have been affected. Yet COVID has also really impacted young people, especially those living in difficult circumstances like refugees, migrants, those with disabilities, or members of the LGBTIQ+ community, and those facing gender-based violence. Some of the impacts include decreased access to key services across all sectors, isolation and mental health challenges, economic and social distress due to the quarantines, which have limited job opportunities, employment, and livelihoods, protection challenges, including gender-based violence, domestic violence, early marriage, and transactional sex. And that's happened during decreased monitoring and response opportunities. Adolescents and youth have found themselves prematurely out of school and with no access to learning opportunities due to school closures and economic difficulties, and restrictions on movement and participation. The guidance recommends key actions for how to structure humanitarian response in a way that really addresses young people's needs and involves them in the response itself. And so some of the key actions that we really need to be thinking about are first, really ensuring that services across all sectors are sensitive to youth needs. That includes specific attention to key areas like sexual and reproductive health care for adolescents and youth, mental health, and psychosocial support. Second is engaging young people's participation in the response and collaborating with youth-led groups and youth-led initiatives. Third is constantly building the capacity of youth-led organizations and youth-led groups to take part in COVID-19 response, including coordination, accessing funding, and designing and delivering programs. Fourth is resourcing youth-led groups, and that means funding youth-led initiatives and including young people in coordination mechanisms where decisions about funding are made. And finally, generating data that is disaggregated by age, by gender, and by disability to support youth to be involved in the research and data collection, as well as be involved in accountability mechanisms. So as humanitarian actors, one of the most powerful things that we can do is to create space for young people, including young refugees, to tackle these challenges and to fill the gaps that they see in their communities. We need to acknowledge, recognize, and support their efforts. Now, I'd like to introduce Farida Luanda, a young refugee leader who has been super active in her community in Chakatu refugee settlement in Uganda. And she can share some more information about her experience leading response to COVID in her community. Farida, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening around the world. My name is Farida Rwanda. I'm 23 years old. I'm a refugee from Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. I lived at Chakatu refugee settlement for 5 years. And this year I resettled to live in Stockholm, Sweden. I'm the founder of the Vision Refugee Youth Group and One Touch Solar Powered Music Studio. I work to empower young people and women. I'm a member of Search for Common Grounds Youth Leadership Council and the Global Refugee Youth Network. I'm a change champion. Let me talk about the context where the Vision Group works. About 100,000 refugees live in Chakatu Refugee Settlement. It is a rural settlement and refugees are living close by the host community. During COVID, bans on street vendors and stay-at-home orders have left many without an income. Schools closed, girls, women, and others faced domestic violence or sexual exploitation and had nowhere to turn. During this COVID period, many NGOs and agencies were not able to work in the field. In many locations, this resulted in the lack of information and reduction in key services. So we decided we cannot sit down. It is our community. Together with the Vision Refugee Youth Group, I've been working tirelessly to sensitize communities about the COVID-19 pandemic and the preventive measures as shared by the Ministry of Health, like wearing masks, washing hands, and distancing. We also record songs with awareness messages about COVID-19. As Minister of Health in Uganda advised everyone to wash hands frequently as a simple preventive measure against COVID-19, but 60% of people living in Chakatu refugee settlement did not have a hand washing facility with water and soap at their homes. This small but important action remained out of reach. The Vision Group used available resources to make tippy taps. We used jelly cans from the oil we use in our homes. Myself and other young people from my group washed and fixed the jelly cans with ropes to make reliable washing facility for each household in our community. We also educate community on the benefits of hand washing and how they can use our washing facilities and keep themselves and their homes clean. We supplied 800 tippy taps made from jelly cans. We have focused on people with disability, elderly people, single mothers, and child mothers. We worked with Oxfam and African Youth Action Network, IAN, to get soap to distribute to washing hands and keeping our homes clean. African Women and Youth Action for Development, AWAD, provide materials to make masks, and UNHCR provide free chats to share information. We also worked with markets and business centers to install hand washing facilities. We have found that providing tippy taps and improving hygiene behaviors, especially amongst women and girls, also improves hygiene for most vulnerable, including children. Thanks in part of the provision of tippy taps, hygiene norms like hand washing are now well practiced in Chakatu. When we go to protection, because many organizations cannot send their workers to work in the field, they are not able to monitor the protection situation. Because everyone is at home, violence is high. Girls in the reception centers have a lot of problems. Girls and women were suffering and don't know what to do or where to report. They cannot speak about this. Together with the Vision Group, we have identified and addressed protection concerns like girls at risk of child marriages and transaction sex and domestic violence. We have been giving counseling. We help to connect women and girls to organizations like Uganda Youth Adolescents and Health Forum and Save the Children that could provide support, and I report cases of violence to get helped. On sexual and reproductive health rights, during COVID, young people have had limited access to health care and information on safe sex. With the Vision Group, we worked with the Uganda Youth Adolescents and Health Forum on the campaigning Jifunze Ukingo, that means learn protection. We share advice to prevent sexual transmitted infections and unwanted pregnancy. We also distributed more than 20,000 condoms. We worked to ensure that young people, especially girls, are part of the solution for health, safer sex, and gender equality in these difficult times. Lessons learned. What I've learned amidst COVID-19 is that it is very important to work together, whether a refugee or a national. COVID doesn't pick who to infect. It takes all of us to fight together. Young women and men are doing an amazing job identifying and responding to the struggles that our community are facing. Working with young people has huge potential to leverage effort and investment. I would like to share few recommendations for NGOs, UN agencies, and governments. Please recognize and reinforce the important work that we, refugee youth, have been doing. Partner with us, work with us, support us, give us space to work, but don't abandon us. Trust us. Support youth groups to build organizational capacity so we can be strong actors in community-based projects. Fund refugee youth-led organizations and support them to develop financial and project management skills. Enable accountability and transparency by involving young refugees and host communities, youth in prioritizing resources and making decisions. Finally, ensure sustainable partnerships by creating an enabling environment with opportunities for continuous learning and funding so young refugees can grow and sustain their engagement. We invite humanitarian actors to partner with the refugee youth-led initiatives to advance joint efforts during this global crisis and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farida. Your presentation really helps us to understand the reality in the field and the value of youth-led initiatives in response to the pandemic. Now we have some time for discussion. So please feel free to turn on your video and get ready to either type in the chat or raise your hand, and we'd like to hear from you directly. Our first question for you is, do you have any examples of engaging young people during COVID? So we have a couple comments starting to come in from Pearl. Odigwe, amazing work, Farida. How do you ensure that this work continues and that these girls and women continue to get support? Okay, that's a pretty key question. How do you ensure that this work continues and that these girls and women continue to get support? Because I know you're actively involved with them on an ongoing basis. We have another comment. Thanks, Farida. I learned a lot today. Yeah. Go ahead, Farida.
As the Vision Group, what we did, these women amidst COVID-19 and girls, we put training skills, and then we see that what we learned to work together can keep on going. It's like, it's about the engagement I talked about, engage them locally so that we can give them those skills and they can train others. We keep on moving with that. So programs,
really basically youth training youth and then them being able to continue the work and in fact train others. So really that starting that chain reaction. And we have another great comment here from John Mark Okondo. He said, excellent presentation. Yes, we work with groups in Mali and Niger where the youth groups produce liquid soaps and also music to create awareness of COVID-19. So sounds like some similar activities. John, thank you for sharing. Madhavan Palin from Palin International shared, it's a good idea to paste posters of information on COVID-19 awareness on community boards. So again, some similar activities that have proven to be really effective. Molly Chan shared a good example here in Latin America. Through social networks and other digital platforms, the access to CSE, I'm not sure what that is, allows us, so it was so limited by COVID, but technology allowed that many more young people were able to access CSE, and this has enabled access to safe spaces and allowed us to reduce stigma and discrimination by HIV. So great points in terms of using digital access to help people get access to safe spaces. Another comment from Laura Valencia with the Global Refugee Youth Network. When the support is for a long time with the correct monitoring, it ensures the initiative of the project can be maintained. So I think Laura is just highlighting the importance of that ongoing engagement, not one-off investments in youth engagement or youth initiatives, but ongoing support, which is a really important point. Molly is clarifying for me, comprehensive sexual education, CSE. Thank you, Molly. I learned something new. It's important to be on top of our acronyms. Thanks for clarifying. I appreciate that. Finally, John Mark had another question directly for Farida. Farida, did you engage with faith-based communities on the sexual reproductive health work that you were doing? There's some good examples in Goma where youth ambassadors worked with faith leaders. Farida, could you just comment on that, on your work with faith leaders?
Yeah, I think through networking, youth networking and communication, we can be engaged, but by now I don't know much about the faith-based communities. As Farida, it needs, I first have to learn from them, and then they can learn from me, and then we put the networking and communication as young people to see that SCR, HLR work, we can engage other communities, because I'm seeing this one is in Goma, where I came from. Even me, I came from Goma, and it would be a good possibility if there's a chance we can engage each other and work together, Goma and other refugee settlements, because we are from the same continent, and I'll be happy to work with them.
So I think that's really, thanks, Farida. I think that's really important. Just looking at the importance of that dialogue and opening communication and how valuable that can be to reaching more people and helping to get messages across. I'd like to draw your attention to the next question I wanted to pose to you. So are there any lessons that you've learned through work engaging young people during the COVID pandemic, or as a young person working during the COVID-19 pandemic? What are lessons that you've learned? So again, please feel free to either speak up or pose your question in the chat.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Kate. This is Ayushi Bhatnagar from Radar India. We are a humanitarian organization based in Pune, which is in the Maharashtra state. Currently, we are facing the pandemic at a huge scale, and our state is leading in terms of numbers for the number of cases of COVID. So in terms of youth participation, one thing that we've learned is that the engagement of young people from the remote locations of the communities have increased to an extent that they are willing to engage with the local partners, and they are ready to engage with local self-governing bodies to actually give us real-time information in a way that the right things and the right requirements are understood by the government, and they receive the right kind of supplies or the right kind of things that are required, whether be it vaccine, be it medical supplies and everything. So somewhere down the line, youth is now coming from remote places and showing more engagement towards a better and a more resilient living. So that is how I would like to put it. The case scenario in India is like.
Thank you so much, Ayushi. That's a great example. And I think it shows how youth can be directly involved in both sharing information that directly informs response and emergency response in real time. And that's quite a powerful example. And I think something that we can all take on board. How could we incorporate that in different ways? So great example. Thanks for sharing. I see also a comment from Phony Joyce from the Global Refugee Youth Network. Some of the lessons learned is the importance of collaborative work. There's really enough space for all to participate in the humanitarian response. I think that's really wise words, right? The importance of working together, and youth can be really good at that. She also commented there's a need to increase both financial and capacity building support to youth-led initiatives, in particular women-led initiatives. They have skills and ways to work, but often they lack the support to scale up their solutions. Super important point. Thank you, Phony. I know we have about 6 or 7 minutes left in our discussion session. I want to move to our third question. And again, I really want to invite people to share their comments in the chat box or raise your hand and we can hear from you directly. So our third question is, what do you see are the opportunities in your context to scale up these types of efforts? These types of efforts directly supporting young people to respond effectively during the COVID. So we'd love to hear from more of you. What are your ideas about opportunities in your context to scale up these types of efforts? So I think Tony gave us one idea, which is the importance of increasing financial and capacity building support to youth-led initiatives. That's one way to scale them up, right? In particular, being mindful of looking to support women and girl initiatives led by women and girls. Young people have the skills, but they often lack the support to scale up what they're trying to do. Any other suggestions would be welcome. Love to hear from you. Farida, do you have any last sort of suggestions to everybody on what are your suggestions in terms of what could be done to scale up these types of efforts? For example, the work of Division Group. What would help Division Group to sustain and scale up the work that you have been doing? I'm just waiting for Farida. I want to highlight Pearl had a really important suggestion, which is technological capacity in developing countries. This is so true, and I'm glad you raised this, Pearl, because often we're so connected virtually now. If people don't have the connectivity, it's hard for them to engage in the broader discussion. So great point, Pearl.
Hello, Kate.
Hi, Farida. Do you have some other suggestions about how group like Division Group, what could help them to scale up their work further?
The Vision Group, we came up, we're working together, first of all, to work together as team and to love each other and to love our community. It's very important. And even still to engage other young people in the community. That helped us a lot as the Vision Group, working with other young people, other groups to train them skills and to see that we use that small resources we have as young people in the community, because sometimes others, they see as that to do something or to make change, you have to be with a lot of things. But before that kind of support comes, we stood and we started where we was, with what small we have, to say that we are engaging the community with many young people, other groups, visiting others, and working together as a group. That has helped us to scale up what we are doing in the community, mostly.
Great comments, Farida. And I see a really important theme here, which is the importance of collaboration. Collaboration, training, and capacity building. It's something Tony raised earlier, and Farida's emphasizing it, that working, building a good team and then reaching out and collaborating with other young people. That's really, I think, a key to success and a key to scaling up. And Laura, also from Global Refugee Youth Network, has highlighted the importance of training. If we train people and build their capacity, they're able to scale their own initiatives or to create new ones. I think that's a really important key. That capacity, investment in capacity building enables young people and youth groups to scale themselves up, which is a great point. Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left. I think 3 minutes is what we have left. So I just want to, invite again, any other comments about scaling up or any other aspect of engaging young people to respond during COVID. I think there's been a great discussion and we've heard some really important themes come out. The importance of technology, supporting technology to enable young people to connect and engage. The importance of collaboration amongst young people to create strong teams, but also for those groups to reach out and collaborate with others, as well as the importance of capacity building, which enables people to actually scale up their own work. We have a great comment here from Ishan Ganguly from India. He says, I feel we should be more open to any member of society. Great point. So again, that openness, inclusivity, and collaboration, and the importance of using every resource at hand to help and save as many lives as possible. So I think echoing again some of the comments that Farida made, the importance of using what we have, that is another important theme that's come out. And he's saying any small help to anyone in any way. So distributing clothes, masks, doing anything we can to connect to others and to support, to create solutions. So really consistent themes coming up, and also very powerful themes. I know we're going to wrap up soon and we're going to be whisked out of our Zoom room. as we're wrapping up, and feel free to continue typing any comments you have in the chat, I just want to say very much from myself and from Women's Refugee Commission and from the Global Refugee Youth Network, thank you so much for your participation, for listening to the presentation, and for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. It's been a really positive and constructive discussion. So huge thanks to everybody who participated in our working group here.
So as people are coming back, maybe I can just say I had a chance to go into at least 2 of the breakout discussions, and they were so inspiring, very amazing, great to see colleagues interacting and asking questions. We may not have been able to answer everything, but a huge thank you and round of virtual applause to our working group moderators, Mette, Danielle, and Kate, and to our country presenters, Besan, Ashraf, and Farida, for helping present, take notes, and also to Kayla for taking notes. May I please invite very quickly, and maybe for 2 minutes each, have Besan for group 1 report back, and then we will move to Danielle and Ashraf for group 2, whichever one of you wants to speak, and then third we will have Kate for group 3 to share some key highlights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya. And indeed, I would like to thank the team. We had a very fruitful discussion despite the time. So some of the key points that were highlighted, one was the focus on young people with disabilities and the need to ensure that we are integrating them and we're ensuring that our programs are responsive to young people with disabilities. Another point was in making sure that young people are, similar to the discussions we had earlier, they are leading and supporting in decision-making efforts, and they are participating throughout the way, ensuring that we have clear goals from the beginning and setting those goals with young people to ensure that they are engaged, but also developed. A key component was also on skills building to ensure that we are capacitating young people with the needed skills for them to be able to engage and be empowered to be engaged in our programs, having measurable outcomes and accountability scheme to ensure our programs are done in an efficient and effective manner in response to young people needs. And a lot of the other points were also around participation, meaningful participation, ensuring that we are engaging young people in the decision-making process and we're giving them the right platforms for meaningful engagement. Thank you, Priya, and over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Besan. Appreciate it. And thank you for colleagues who joined in this discussion. And moving on now to Danielle for group 2. Thanks, Danielle. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Priya. So we were looking at the program cycle and we're looking at the tip sheets, which are in the agency guidelines and what this means for programming. We had Ashraf from Cox's Bazar who gave us a real-world example of how this is being done actually right now, implemented in Cox's Bazar. Takeaways. So one first, context is different. So that needs to be taken into account. Timing is important. You know, how, when, at which time we'll engage young people. Gender and age matters. Trust building is absolutely essential, as is a good way of explaining to young people what we're trying to achieve, why they should participate, what is their role. Outreach is important. Outreach as well, as I just said, towards young people, but also towards our humanitarian colleagues. We recognize that specifically in the early phase of the humanitarian response, humanitarian actors are very busy in getting the response right, and space needs to be created with our humanitarian colleagues to also bring in young people's visions and priorities. That's not always easy. As we have seen in some of the recent responses. And then finally, we discussed a little bit the issue of the nexus and how important it is to build participatory approaches with young people already in the development phase, I mean, in general, so that these mechanisms can be activated also in humanitarian response. So the famous nexus, absolutely critical, because, and that links to my earlier point, when a disaster or a humanitarian crisis hits, actors are very busy just getting quickly a response up and running. So if we can then rely on participatory mechanisms which are already in place, that will set us on a path for success. I think I'll leave it there, Priya.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. And key words there, nexus, but also preparedness is key. None of this is possible during an acute response and crisis. So you can't go around mapping youth or organizations, building capacities, bringing in young people if you haven't actually engaged with them in prior efforts. So definitely focus on being prepared, doing your homework, even partnering with them and getting the paperwork in terms of partnership agreements so that you can actually activate these continuing on. Moving on to Kate for working group or breakout room 3. Over to you, Kate, for 2 minutes.
Thanks so much, Priya. We had a great and really lively discussion in our group. We heard about some great examples of young people being really active during COVID and how to engage young people during COVID. We heard about youth groups in Mali and Niger who are also producing liquid soap and using music to create awareness about COVID-19. So doing some work similar to what Farida was doing in Chaka 2 in Uganda. We also heard about a great example in Latin America of working with social networks and other digital platforms to enable young people to continue to access comprehensive sexual education. And so technology really enabled more people to be engaged and to get access to these types of educational sessions. We created a safe space to reduce stigma and discrimination about HIV. We talked quite a bit about lessons that have been learned, and there is some great feedback on this. We heard about sustainability and how really to ensure that this work continues and that girls and women in particular continue to get support. There was a look at engagement locally, skill building and skill development to ensure that more people could train others to be able to continue and carry on that work. We also heard about the importance of engagement with local partners, including engaging local government as really a key for sustainability, as well as working with faith leaders. We also had some, I think, really strong themes around collaborative work. So, young people working together and having a strong team, and then reaching out and collaborating with other young people to engage. There's enough space for everybody to participate in humanitarian response. There was also an emphasis on the need to really provide increased support, both financial and capacity building to youth-led initiatives, and that's an important lessons learned. Finally, when we talked about opportunities in different contexts to scale up this type of work, we heard about the importance of building technological capacity in developing countries where humanitarian crises are taking place, as that's so key and has been so key during COVID to enable young people to engage, and training and capacity building to allow young people to scale up their own initiatives by developing their capacity. And again, the importance of collaboration. Collaboration is really a great vehicle to scale up and continue and sustain this work. Thank you.
Excellent,
and back to you,
Kate.
Priya.
Thank you so much. And I see a very live and active chat between some young people and stakeholders. So continue the sharing. And as Kate said, many of our organizations were able to activate and engage young people during COVID because we had been working with them and those networks and organizations beforehand. And because we knew they could reach out to remote communities far and wide. So there were many challenges, but at the same time, because we had some partnerships in place, we had tried to invest efforts into building capacity. Some of our countries and organizations were able to engage with them. So there is absolutely reason for investing in the preparedness aspects. As many of you go back into your own offices, your own workspaces, do think about how these guidelines can help you in bringing some of these efforts to life, even now, before or during a protracted emergency, or something you can start to put in place later on. So with that, we're coming to the conclusion part of our session. I would like to now turn over to Valentina, who is going to share some key recommendations and takeaways for this audience who has joined us in this session. Thanks. Over to you, Valentina.
Thanks, Priya. What a productive session has been, and we have a lot of information. So as we are heading towards the end, let me share with you 5 key takeaways from today's discussions, just to get a recap. The first one is that we need meaningful engagement of young people in humanitarian efforts. Our suggestion is that you discuss among your colleagues and make sure that our participation is there, that is meaningful, that is safe, and that is also ethical. The second point is about data. We need to do better in terms of collecting data disaggregated by sex and age throughout the program implementation and needs assessment and so forth. The third point is about addressing young people's needs and priorities. I cannot stress more the importance of this, and it could be across sectors and across countries. The fourth point is that we need more investment in developing skills and capacities of young people. And last but not least, we don't forget to use the IASC youth guidelines. They are there for you. See how you can apply them in your area of work, connect with your youth focal points or emergency focal points in your countries, brainstorm with partners, and put the guidelines into concrete actions. And that's it. That's the main takeaways. Thank you so much for your active participation today. Now I would like to invite Anne, my colleague of the Youth Compact Champion Program, to share the call to action that we all develop as young people. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Valentina. Dear speakers and participants, I greet you all. My name is Anne Muthoni from Kenya, and I am a Youth Compact Champion, as well as a co-founder of the Youth Arts Mentorship Initiative, an initiative that aims at imparting artistic and entrepreneurial skills among the unprivileged youth in Kenya. So I have been very active in the humanitarian space, and I have worked with non-governmental organizations that have been providing psychosocial support to refugees, among other forms of support, and to even other vulnerable groups. On behalf of all of us, the young people in this event today, and all the young people in general, we are calling on all humanitarian actors to take the following initiatives and work together with the young people. First, include young people in all their diversity in humanitarian action. We believe that if we do this, we will not only receive our inputs, but also have a creative way to achieve the goals. Secondly, invest in building the capacity of young people. This will strengthen our skills as effective humanitarian actors. Thirdly, involve young people in decision making. We have a right as young people to participate in meaningful ways in key decision-making processes. If you trust our ability to make good decisions in our work, you can also count on us to work with and partner with you. Lastly, support humanitarian actors to develop their capacities and skills to work effectively with and for young people. Recognize and support local youth-led initiatives and organizations in humanitarian response with coaching, mentoring, and funding. So support us, partner with us, and we believe that these collective efforts can make our goals and dreams possible. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Valentina, for those very important takeaways for all of our audience and participants for this session. We hope that we have not overloaded you with too many messages, but these are messages that coincide for what young people want us to accomplish and achieve and how we work with them, and for what the IASC Youth Guidelines are trying to do. With that, it has been such a rich and amazing session. There is never too much time for working groups. We can continue to go on and on. We will definitely be sharing the recordings with all of you. Tamara has already put it out in the chat, where you will be able to find all of the related materials from this session in the exhibition area of the HNPW website. So please look out for more materials that will be posting out there. We've already shared with you the guidelines. We really, really hope you have a chance to look at them and see how they can apply in your area of work. Try to consult with your actors, your partners, your teams, your youth organizations and networks, and get a discussion going. And most importantly, we've taken note of all your questions and queries. Sorry we couldn't answer to everything, but we'll try our best to come back. And we're glad that colleagues also got a chance to connect with each other. We have 3 minutes remaining, and with that, I hope and I'm asking for all of the co-planners and organizers of this session from across all of our teams who have also been behind the scenes, the speakers, the moderators, to please switch on your camera so we can take a quick snapshot, a virtual Zoom snapshot, and that will also show the colleagues all the work that went behind the scenes and the many planning calls to make this event today a success, a possibility for all of you. We hope to have more rollouts like this for our humanitarian and international community. And we really hope you enjoyed the session today. So with that, what you see is some of the people who've planned the session, the organizers, the speakers, and we are ready for a quick virtual Zoom snapshot. Thank you so much. Okay, snapshot taken. And with that, thank you all for joining and hope to connect with you in other ways. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Great job.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thanks for all the
Thank
support.
you. Very nice session.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.